There are many instances in the flow of a program where we want to have random numbers generated. Most often we do this in games where we want the play of the game to be randomized and go through different scenarios and maybe have different outcomes. We'll use random numbers in simulations, again presenting different scenarios, so the simulation isn't always the same. With educational quizzes, we might want to randomize the order of the questions, and for a multiple choice question, randomize the order of the presented answers. We can do unit testing, where we have the computer randomize the data that's being used in the test. And of course, we might want to vary the look and feel, where we randomly maybe choose an opening picture or randomly choose the colors of the background. Those are all ways we might use random numbers. Let's look at how we can generate random numbers with Visual Basic. Random numbers are generated using a random object. And that's true in Visual Basic and most other languages. So we need to initialize a random object in order to use it to generate the random numbers. We're going to create the random object just as we would a variable. So I'm going to dim R&D as random. I tend to use R&D for my random number generator. It's going to equal a new random, and that random, you notice, has parentheses. That's a method. And this new random is what we call a constructor. It creates the random object. Once we've created that object, we can then use it. I can dim my integer as an integer, and it's going to equal R&D dot next. That's another method. So it's a method of the R&D object. And I give it in parentheses a argument of 100. And what that will do is we'll generate an integer between 0 and 99. So the number in parentheses, which is going to be an integer, the top value is going to be 1 less, and the bottom value will be 0. Now, if I wanted a number between 1 and 100, I can add 1 to that number. Think about if we got 0 and we add 1, we get 1. If we get 99 and add 1, we get 100. Now I'm generating a number between 1 and 100. Most often I find I use the next method to generate integers, but there may be times when you want to generate a double value. And so we have an R&D.next double as well. And that will generate a number between 0.0 and 1.0, and the 1.0 is exclusive, so it's going to basically be 0.999999. However, if you wanted a number that's bigger than 1, you can multiply that next double. So if we did R&D next double times 100, we would end up getting a value between 0.0 and 99.99. The way the random number generator works is it actually creates a very, very long list of numbers based on the system clock. So every millisecond, it's going to create different list of numbers. There are times, however, when you always want to have the same sequence of numbers come up every time you run the program. An example might be where you want to repeat a game that maybe you failed in. Free Cell Solitaire on Windows does this very well. It gives you a game number. You can enter that game number when you run the game again to get the exact same sequence. The way we would do that with our random number generator is to give it a seed number inside the parentheses. So on our constructor, rather than empty parentheses, we give it a number. It's going to be an integer value. So here I just use 54321, but every time I run the application, I'm going to get the same list of random numbers. Let's look at an example where we use the random number generator. I created a Visual Basic application that helps a young student practice their math skills in terms of addition. Maybe we're starting out with a very young student, perhaps in first grade, and they're just learning single-digit addition, and we can choose whether the number should be 1, 2, or 3 digits. Click Next Problem, 3 plus 5, and they enter their answer of 8. Check my math, and over here's a scoreboard, keeps track of how many they got correct, how many incorrect. Generate a next problem. And then they can progress on to 2-digit numbers. And if they get one wrong, they're told what the correct answer is. And it color codes the answer with a greenish or reddish background as to whether it's right or wrong. Then they can progress to 3-digit numbers. I'm using the random number generator to create the two numbers of either 1, 2, or 3 digits. Let's take a look at the code and how that's accomplished. I have two sets of radio buttons inside group panels. This one's called RBA1, RBA2, RBA3, and in my second group box for the second number we have RBB1, RBB2, and RBB3. I'll examine the checked property of those to determine whether I should do 1, 2, or 3 digits in the random numbers, which are then displayed in LBL num1 and LBL num2. Everything else is just kind of what we've done before in terms of the user enters their response, click check my math, it's going to compare their response to what the sum is of the two generated numbers, and then increment a correct and incorrect values and calculate the percentage. Let's jump over to the code. So I have some classical variables of num1, num2, and sum is integer, correct, incorrect, for keeping track of their score. And then I have my random number generator, dim R&D as random equals new random. And then for the next problem, where we're generating the number, I'm checking to see if RBA1 is checked. And if it is, then num1 is going to equal rnd.next. And my argument here is 9. It's going to be a number between 0 and 8. But I want a number between 1 and 9. So I'm going to add 1 to it. Else if RBA2 is checked, they want 2 digits, we're going to do an rnd.next of 90, so it's value between 0 and 89, and then adding 10 to it will give me a value between 10 and 99. Else, and we're going to assume that RBA3 is checked, we'll generate a random number between 0 and 899 and add 100 to it. We end up with a number between 100 and 999. Then I need to do the same thing for the second number. Now, just as an example here, rather than doing an if, else structure, I did the next one using ternary numbers. So num2 equals if RBB1 is checked, it's going to be rnd.next of 9 plus 1. Otherwise, it'll be num2. And then my next line, we're going to check RBB2. If it's checked, we'll do a random number of rnd next 90 plus 10. And then the third statement here, if RB3 is checked, then we'll do a random number generation of rnd.next 900 plus 100. So doing the exact same thing for num2 as we did for num1, and then finding the sum and displaying those. That is how the random number generator is used in this project. If you'd like to try to replicate this project, I'll show you the rest of my code, and you can pause the video as needed and check your code against mine. So here is the btn check math, where I'm simply doing an if-else structure, see if they got it correct or incorrect, and updating the scoreboard. And then there's a reset button to reset the scoreboard. If you just jumped into this video, you can see all the videos from the Programming Practicum playlist by clicking on the image in the lower right. And if you'd like to be alerted to future videos I create, you can click my picture in the top right to subscribe to the channel.